What's up, everybody? Welcome back to What Is This Podcast? I am Dave, and with me, as always, is my man Gene.
Yo, yo.
So, what up, Gene? How you been?
Same old, same old. What about yourself?
Same shit as always.
I hear you. I
same,
hear you.
Same COVID living, but yeah. So what's been going on in terms of housekeeping things of that nature?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if I had mentioned this in the last episode, but I decided to pull the trigger and get myself a new machine. I was having some serious issues with my previous laptop that just really limited me to the point where I just wasn't really getting my work done. So I went ahead and shelled out a few grand, but it's an investment that's gonna that I'll get back in the long run for sure.
Right. And that's the shitty thing about technology sometimes is it's very expensive.
Especially if you're trying to do it on a professional level. You know what I mean? Like you need the right tools and the right tools are unfortunately expensive.
Right. How old is your other laptop, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So my old laptop is about 4 or 5 years old. It's a PC, and that's typically the shelf life.
Yeah.
So I did run it into the ground. So it's definitely that time.
Yeah, I mean, you got your money's worth out of it though. So
I sure did. Best believe I made sure I did that.
All right. So I guess today's topic of conversation. So at this recording is recording 6. So this would be the 6th episode we've recorded. I don't know what we haven't talked really about. Are we going to release them sequentially as recorded or whatever? But so we're on the road to 10 episodes, which has sort of always been a goal for us, is to get to 10 episodes.
Yep.
So looking back on the past 5, let's take some time to sort of evaluate how things are going so far. Like if just different aspects of what we've done so far on trying to figure out what this is. So, just to get started, how do you feel about everything we've done so far?
I feel good. I think the most important thing is that we are showing growth. We're being very mindful and critical about the areas that we're weaker in, and we're trying to do what we can to kind of sure those parts up. So that's really all I can ask from both of us.
Right.
So I'm happy where we're at.
Cool. All right. Yeah. And that's definitely like, because I went back and listened to a few of the episodes, not all of the episodes, because I realized I deleted some of the stuff off my computer because I just didn't think I'd need it. And now I know that that's a mistake.
Yeah, it's probably not a good idea. Yeah.
Only I think, my rationale was that I'll have the episode at some point, but it's always good to just have multiple copies of.
For sure.
Of
I think you should have I think usually when it comes to like assets, just as a creative, it's usually a good idea to have it, especially if you have a client for at least a year or two, so have some kind of backup where you can kind of just store these things in case you need to, come back for variation or something,
Right. Like it was interesting the other day.
Versioning was the word I was looking for, but yeah.
I got what you meant. The other day I was thinking, and this is such a weird thing to be thinking about. Maybe not, but I was trying to because we're on camera, obviously. So I do think a little bit about what clothes I'm wearing.
Yeah.
And the other day I went and I was like, did I wear this in another episode? And I went to pull up the visual recording, and I was like, no shit, I only record your screen. So I couldn't see what I was wearing.
Yeah.
I was just like, fuck.
That's funny. That's funny. I don't think anyone's really picking that out just yet,
No, but it was just, it's something that was on my mind. So
of course.
It was just funny, but
well, it shows that you're taking this seriously. I kind of like that. you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to look like a slut. Like today, I'm sort of in dad mode, like a function over fashion kind of thing over here because it's
Yeah.
fucking freezing outside.
Yo, it's so cold, man.
Um, Actually, I lost power last night for about a minute and a half, and it scared
Really?
the shit
Oh,
out of me.
because of the wind, right?
Yep. But that's neither here nor there. It was just a pulse pounding second. Um, but and going back over the episodes, like just picking up, like I definitely think the conversations are getting much better
I
as
agree.
they're going
I
along.
agree.
I
I
think the
agree.
first conversation was really good. And the second episode, I have problems with the second episode in terms of myself because I found myself to be interrupting a lot. And it was sort of like
Okay.
funny because in the first episode, we talked all about having a conversation and listening to the other person. And I found myself to just sort of not be super following that in the second episode. Um, but I like, I think part of that is just in conversation. Sometimes people can start to talk
That's
over
definitely
each other.
that's definitely part of it. Hey,
Um,
and look, and having a good conversation, or having a quality conversation is a very hard thing to do. Being a better conversationalist requires work and being mindful and being in the present, and that's a very hard thing to do, especially the fact that you have ADHD, which makes it a lot fucking harder.
right.
You know, so
Yeah, my mind is on like a million different like you're saying one
you
thing, I'm
know,
thinking about that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
God
yeah.
forbid there's anything in my visual range. Um,
But you're putting in the effort, and that's all I could ever ask.
right. And I mean, but and that's another thing sort of this podcast is becoming good for is just being mindful of myself in terms of just basic interactions with other people. And it's just good that we're using this to sort of evaluate ourselves. Like this podcast is really surprising me as it's going along because we started out in that first episode sort of talking about all the things it could be or whatever, and it is sort of charting its own course of as we've said in other episodes, we're sort of going through this creative process in real time. um and I just think that's sort of interesting. And now I've completely, speaking of ADHD, I've now lost my train of thought. um, but yeah, so I don't know where that was going, but it's
And
interesting how we came up with all these things, and it is sort of defining itself for right now in a really interesting
yeah,
way. But how we are sort of leaving it still open ended in terms of because like one of the first things you talked about in the first episode was the idea of a startup, and I think we're
yeah,
following that sort of template really well in terms of like how to build, because these are the conversations that we have with each other on the phone about what we're going to do. We're just
on air.
having them on mic.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do see where for some people that could be very, like, a thought I had was like for a certain population this is probably very boring just listening to us talk about.
Yeah,
But
sure.
at the same time, I feel like, there is a lot of value in doing it this way. Um,
No, I agree, and I feel like the where where we would see the true value in, especially the first few episodes, is that depends on how this whole thing unfolds. If this becomes a bigger podcast, with a large audience, people are going to want to look back and kind of see how it all happened, right? It may be very dry and boring right now if
yeah.
you're but like 5 years down the line, if there's all of a sudden there's 1 million subscribers and you have a 500,000 clicks per episode, and they look back at this and be like, holy shit, they've come a long way, and I think that's where you'll derive the most value from these episodes.
Yeah, 100%. And it's sort of interesting how how it's how did it all start, because
Yeah.
it's sort of like we're like usually there's a feature and then there's a making of that is a bonus aspect
Okay.
of
Yep.
that feature.
Sure.
But our
Yep.
our feature is the making of right now.
Yeah.
And it's sort of flipped.
Interesting. Yeah. No. It's an
Um
interesting way to look at it.
like it is sort of just a behind the scenes. So far it's just we're just starting with the behind the scenes and then we'll figure out where to go from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm just very sort of it's weird to say, but I'm just impressed with how we've done so far. In terms because it's just I don't know, it is kind of a weird concept to have no concept.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely probably the most sure way to like not have anything happen because but
Right.
like I kind of like that, the fact that we're taking the untaken path,
Right. But it also allows us, it gives us the freedom to pivot whenever we want to pivot.
Great. No, absolutely. 100%.
Um,
I agree.
like again, that first episode, like we sort of talked about a lot of the thing, like, you know, um, that whole idea of going down the list of podcast concepts, which, is something that I think it would take some time to get to that point, the way
Yeah.
we've sort of set it up right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact that we put that out there, that is something that actually excites me. Because not only that, that would also, in terms of sort of connecting back to earlier, sort of like the self-improvement aspect of what this podcast could be, that's going to allow us to learn about so many things.
Yeah. That I'm excited about for sure.
Yeah. And also interacting with, because a thing we could do with that is, I remember in one of our early conversations about this, when you first brought that idea up, there was an idea to also interview people sort of in those fields, because we're not really, as it stands now, we're definitely not an interview show, but again, we could be an interview show. And then we would have, it sort of free us up to even just talk to different people. And would think even in that, talk to them about how they go about making their podcast in
Yeah.
that field of podcasting.
Interesting. I like that idea a lot.
So
I
we're
like that
talking
idea a
about
lot.
them, not just about, their particular, like if we're like going back to the first episode, if we're talking about an engineer of, nipple clamps, we talk about, how they would like, what is your audience? Like we sort of go through it with them. Like, is your podcast just for people who like nipple clamps, or is it a greater engineering podcast? But
Yeah.
but we also can talk to them about their field and not just the podcast. So we're learning
Sure.
all these different things at the same time. And I think that is a very interesting place.
There's definitely a lot of potential. There's definitely a lot of potential there. And I definitely look forward to that. I think, especially with the interviews, I think we can get a lot of value from that. I feel like that's actually an area that we can shine at. Because me personally, I can say, I not to toot my own horn here, but I feel as though I ask very good questions. I can prepare very good questions, and also in the middle of a conversation, I can ask good questions. And I feel like there are a lot of potentially great conversations to be had,
right,
with this podcast.
And I think in terms of that sort of like becoming a better conversationalist, interviews are only going to make that, because it is also like asking great questions is one thing, but then being able to sort of pivot and take something they said and come up with a new question on the spot. Like you have your prepared questions, and then be able to sort of like freely move through that.
Yeah, find that balance.
Right, and I think the best interviewers, like that's how they go, and they just become great conversationalists. I will say that the one just thing about the few episodes we've done so far is there is sort of a lot of repetition at the moment in terms of like we sort of say some of the same things. We've said some of the same things in a couple of the episodes, like in the audience episode and the marketing. Was it a marketing episode or the systems episode? We sort of talked about the avenues of which we will put podcasts out. Like it sort of came back up, and it was sort of very much the same conversation. I do think that's something that'll work itself out in the future, but I think it is something that we should probably be a little bit mindful about, that we don't keep repeating ourselves.
No, it's funny because that's kind of one of the principles that Celeste Headley, another shout out. She repetition. You don't repeat yourself. There's no point. Say what you want to say once and clearly, and just move on.
All right, yeah, and I think that's that's super
That's
important
just
because people will
yeah,
just lose interest if you just saying the
yeah,
same shit over and
and
over.
that's where being mindful comes in, and being present, and having to kind of painfully go back and critique yourself and listen to yourself, and it's painful. I hate listening to my voice.
Mm-hmm.
um I hate when I notice these little mistakes, and when these words that I like 100% or sure, like things I constantly repeat as fillers, like it's annoying, but that's the only way that I'm gonna get better. You know what I mean? I gotta really find the root of some of these issues and just root them out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I say right, and like what I just did, I do that
Yeah,
constantly myself.
yeah, me too.
And
Yeah,
you know, because that's definitely like I did notice that you would say sure a lot in
a
the
lot.
episodes, and I would say like and
Yeah,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
yeah,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, like that. I
yeah,
did that a lot. Um,
yeah.
but you're right. There's just like it is a very painful. I think for people like us, I don't know, because I'm also very self-critical. So like having to listen to myself when I'm already critical of myself just makes me sort of
It's
extra
tough.
critical of myself.
It's a tough thing. It's a tough
Um,
thing. But think about how much tougher you're gonna be with time. On episode 100. You're gonna look back to episode 1 and kind of see the growth.
mm,
And that's just gonna make you, I would think, a less critical person. I think if anything, it's gonna make you a more confident person.
I yeah, I would hope that that is
Yeah,
the case.
yeah.
That doesn't
I
make
think
me
I
like
think
a
so.
more critical person. Um,
I but I think so, because you're gonna get great feedback, you'll get great feedback, and you'll see, and I think you'll be honest enough with yourself to kind of be like, hey, I did a good thing. I've gotten better in this area, and I should be proud of myself. And
mm,
that's where the confidence comes from.
yeah, yeah, and that's something I definitely because I think that's one thing I could definitely stand to get from this podcast is confidence.
Yeah,
Which is something that I don't have a shit ton of in my life. But that's
yeah,
neither here nor there.
yeah.
Um,
But that can be cultivated with accomplishment. You
mm.
know.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely, like I said in the last podcast, it's sort of like the theme of like unfulfilled potential. Um, it's just something I need. I just need to accomplish some shit. Um,
Yeah.
but is that something like in terms of yourself? Is that something you're hoping, like when we get to episode 100, like, um, and you've gone back, like, is that something you're hoping to get out of it, just to see like that growth?
That's honestly, that's really the only thing that drives me these days. It's just figuring out what actually turns me on and excites me. Tackling that thing and trying to make these incremental improvements along the way. That's pretty much like one of the very few things that I actually get joy, like actual joy from. um Failing miserably on a daily basis,
Mm.
but later on that evening just being 1% better than I was the day previous at whatever it is that I'm working on, like that struggle brings joy, funny enough.
I
So
mean,
yes.
it makes
So
sense.
yes. Yeah.
That definitely makes sense. And I get that's something we talked about last episode is just the idea of failure, um, and what that means, to fail and
Yeah.
to sort of recover from that. Um,
So yeah, that to answer your question, yes. But
mm,
I also like to make a shit ton of money, so I
right,
don't have to, work for somebody else.
right.
And as I mentioned in previous podcasts, in terms of like the podcast world, I'd like to own, or be part of a very, a quality network. And to cross pollinate with like-minded podcasts, and reach other audiences and have and ultimately have great conversations,
Mm,
and hopefully conversations that somehow add value to people's lives.
right. And there we go. I mean, again, there's that like, I mean, that's the theme that keeps coming back up. It's just,
And that's gonna happen.
right.
You know what I mean? We
Um,
are who we are. There's
mhm,
certain values and ideas and aspirations or dreams that we have, and they're gonna keep coming up.
right. And as they should, because, the more we talk about it and the more we're actually doing, because that's the thing is I think, you know, we've talked about shit for so long and now we're
Yep.
fucking doing it. And
Yep.
so that's all that
That's the
matters
important thing.
is
That's
doing it.
all that matters. That's all that matters.
Um, and I think this type of episode, by the way, is something we came up with, talked about doing a while ago, is to have these sort of, you know, every so often
Report cards.
right. And I don't think they should be super frequent. Like it shouldn't be like every 5 episodes.
Yeah.
Because that's just crazy. But I think this is a good thing to do. And it also does fit with the theme of, you know, the creative process. Like you always, when you get to a certain point in any creative endeavor you're doing, you sort of stop, you look at it, and it's like, you know, in terms of making an album, it's like you stop, you listen to all the music you've done so far, and you're like, what's working, what isn't working. And it's just, you know, another part of that I think is because I think that there's value in that too, is just, you know, just being so self-critical on air could help other people to sort of do that in their own creative projects. You know what I mean?
So
like,
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What is the measuring stick, right? So if we are going to have kind of like these report card episodes, like what are we measuring? You know, what are we measuring? Like, I mean, what are the variables that we're measuring? What are we measuring it up against?
That's a good question. Well, one of them would be just, you know, do we ourselves feel like we are doing better? Like, is this batch of episodes better than the last batch of episodes?
Okay.
You know, so we're sort of, one of the things is, excuse me, is critiquing ourselves against ourselves, to see if we've grown. Like, are the conversations like, you know, I think it should each report card episode should have a different set of parameters. Like we sort of, like in the next one, we can look back and be like, did we sort of cut out, like, did Dave cut out saying like so much and so much? Like, is the conversation a lot more fluid? Like, are these things not tripping us up as much as before? And then, because it's hard not to want to critique against other shows. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's a conversation. Like maybe that's how we spend the rest of this podcast. Like, what do you think those variables should be?
Yeah. No, it only makes sense, you know? So with that kind of, you know, framework, it would then make sense to ask ourselves, all right, given the previous 5 episodes, what are some of the glaring things that we need to improve upon, to kind of measure, you know, for the next report card? For me personally, I have to reevaluate whether or not I can truly do this as stoned as I have been for every episode, right? Because if anybody who knows me that if you see me, it's good to assume that I'm stoned, right? Like, I mean, like, I'm rarely sober in public. I'm rarely sober, period.
Right.
I smoke. I am a pothead.
Yeah.
You know, let's just go ahead and say that, right? So, but my question is to myself, I ask myself, like, you know, I've had some moments, or I've made some points I'm actually pretty proud of. I'm proud of, you know, the clarity at which I was able to communicate a thought. I'm proud of the idea that I communicated. And then there are times where I'm just like, what the fuck did I say? Or what was I trying to say? And I feel as though a big reason that I have those moments is because I'm super fucking stoned. And like, I just had one of those lapses. So, you know, that's something that I have to ask myself. All right, can you go, you know, can you not smoke until after the episode, you know? And that's probably one thing that I would measure for the
Okay.
next report card.
I will say, as someone who's not stoned ever in
Mm-hmm.
these episodes,
Mm-hmm.
I don't pick up on that a lot.
Okay.
I mean, I know you, and I know I do
Yeah,
know the
like because you
frequency at
only
which you
really
do
know
things.
you only really know me high, right?
Right,
Like, do
right.
you know sober Gene? Like, I don't
I think
know.
I've been
You
around
know?
you. I've been around that version a few times, but
Okay, that's
generally,
fair. That's
um,
fair.
but at the same time, you do know me in both sort of zones,
Sure.
because I do partake, but then I go on very long stretches of not
You
doing
do.
that. And I'm in one of those stretches right now of just um sobriety, for
Yeah.
lack of a, because but whatever. But so I'm not, um it doesn't come through that much. Like I think a lot of, maybe so, because you've been pretty clear in every point you've tried to make so far. This
Oh,
isn't
I.
me saying that you should be stoned all the time.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I don't think it's affecting things. Like, I don't think anybody's going to pick up on that other than the times that you bring it up. Like, you are pretty you're
Oh,
very
thanks, man.
coherent. Like, there's nothing.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, thank you. But I think, and it's not even really for the audience. Like, like it's really more for me.
Hmm,
I'm serious about this. I want to
yeah,
take this
absolutely.
seriously. And am I being a professional when I come into these episodes inebriated? And then I think to myself, well, fucking, fucking Tucker Carlson's on fucking Xanax or Adderall or something. You know what I mean? Like, is it so bad that I'm smoking cannabis? You know what I mean?
but,
Like,
but I think that's the thing, is I think is it's a creative pursuit. And I do sort of hate the weed makes you more creative than, or weed makes you creative, because I disagree with that. Like, you have to be creative in the first place. It might up your creativity, but unless you're creative in the first place, weed's not going to fucking do anything for you. But that's neither here nor there. But I think it only becomes unprofessional when your behavior in doing that becomes
that's a
unprofessional.
good point.
And like, so far, again, nothing you have done has been quote unquote unprofessional. Like, we're both relatively on time for what we need to do. Um, you don't spaz out in the middle of an episode. You're not confrontational in a dickish way. Like,
Yeah.
you haven't
Yeah.
done anything unprofessional.
Sure. That's
So,
fair. No, that's fair.
like, yeah, I think it's not something I think you should be as caught up in it. I mean, I would say try it a few times, not stoned, and see what the differences are. Just,
Because I will say this as a creative individual.
yeah,
You had mentioned earlier that weed isn't going to make you more creative, and I agree, 100%. You if anything, it enhances your creativity, and
sure,
I feel like the reason why it enhances your creativity is it cannabis makes it a lot easier to um get into that flow state,
sure.
right?
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. And that's where, like, it's not gonna, like, what I mean by it's not gonna make you more creative. It's not that, like, you're gonna come up with these magical ideas that you came up with
Yeah,
when you
I
weren't
used to think
high.
so, but no.
Right. But no,
Yeah,
it's not. But it's like, it'll just put you more into a zone. And that's
exactly.
about it. Like, you're gonna have the same
Yeah,
ideas whether you're stoned or not. It's just that
yeah,
in one avenue you might be able to lock in a little bit more. And I
yeah,
think that, like, with music, that is a huge thing. Like, I sort of, when it comes to drumming, I can lock in with people a little bit more, because
yeah,
you're more, it oddly, I would say it focuses you a little bit more in that creative
yeah.
space.
You're more sensitive to your environment.
Right. But I would say, yeah, maybe try to do a couple episodes not. And I would say, don't tell me. Don't
Yeah,
ever
yeah.
tell
No,
me
no.
when it's
Yeah,
one
yeah.
way or the
Again,
other.
yeah, for
So,
sure. And that's a personal thing. That's like a
right.
personal growth thing.
Mhm.
Another thing that I'd want to work on is the filler, to kind of stop using the filler words,
Right.
the shores, the 100%.
Mhm.
When I'm making a point, I'll say right, like, as a question. And it's funny is that, like, I realized, like, in a subconscious way, that's very manipulative, right? right?
Right.
Right? Because like the person like automatically they're kind of pulled to agree with me.
Sure.
So if I'm like, right, you said right, and like you're kind of having that person saying like yes constantly. So like if you have somebody say yes long enough, like you can they could probably disagree with your point. They're gonna like say yes because they've been kind of trained to leading up to that point, right?
Right. But it's true. Like like my when somebody said like when you say right, like my first inclination is to be like right, yeah,
Yeah, and I'm not trying to do that. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to debate with anybody. I want to have good dialogue.
right,
I'm not trying to persuade anybody. I'm just simply trying to share ideas.
right, right. And that's but some of these filler words, I think as long as we are more conscious of them, but I think some of them are gonna happen no matter what. Like when I'm not talking, like when you're talking a lot, I'll say,
Mhm,
I'll go, yeah,
mhm.
right, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's sort of just like it's to keep myself in the conversation, and but it's also like it's just that's just sort of part of a conversation. Like when I'm talking and you say sure, like it's a filler word, but it also is I think is a way of letting the other person know that you're listening to them. You're still engaged with them. I think sometimes it can come off like when I do it, I feel like maybe it's a little condescending sometimes. Like, right, yeah,
Okay.
mhm.
That depends on some you can definitely interpret it that way.
Right. And that's for me.
Yeah.
When I'm doing it. Um, but like and like that is a hard thing to sort of overcome because I feel like in just a conversation that's how people talk sometimes, and it's sort of hard to sort of like when you've been talking like this, and like that's I've talked like that my whole life, and it's sort of
Yeah.
hard when you're on a microphone to sort of deprogram that shit out of you. But as long as we're mindful of it, but we can't drive ourselves insane. Like I don't
Of
want to
course
be
not.
sitting down listening to an episode
Of
with
course
like
not.
with a pen and being like, I did it this time, I did it this
No, that's
time, I did it this
ridiculous.
time, and then it's just like
Yeah,
I'm
that's
losing
ridiculous.
my
That
mind.
yeah. Yeah, that you're yeah, that's self-defeating at that point.
Right.
But if you pay attention to some of like the great conversationalists,
Hmm.
you don't see a lot of that.
Right.
Of course it happens, they're not androids, but you notice a very clear and crisp fluid conversation where there isn't a lot of ums and ahs and a lot of fillers.
Sure.
They may take they may take more time and there may be more space in between phrases, but that's just because they're being more mindful and more measured with what they're saying. And that's something I feel like comes with mindfulness and plus experience.
Mm. Yeah, that I definitely agree with. And now all I can think about is the word. Like, and this is the problem. Like now we're in this place. We're in this shitty world that we've created.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but we will get. So I guess my point is that we can't sort of like drive ourselves crazy thinking about the filler words, but
of
it's
course
something
not.
that we always have to be mindful for.
Yeah,
And
and
I
that's
would
how
say
we'll get
that
better.
that's probably something every report card episode will probably look at
Yeah,
filler words. That'll probably be a
sure.
constant moving forward, just because that is a constant part of conversation. Until we weed it out, until one day it's not part of the report card because we've just stopped fucking doing that.
Yeah. Um,
Um,
another area for me that I want to improve upon is preparation.
mhm.
I feel
Same.
like that's really what's gonna propel us to the next level as far as content goes. Because right now we're really kind of just winging it
Mhm.
and making it a point to kind of show up because that's what's important in order to create that momentum.
Right.
But we're really just kind of winging it, and we'll have our conversations in between episodes to kind of discuss how we're gonna move forward. But my excuse for right now is that I do have a lot of things going on. I do have a lot of projects going on. I'm going simultaneously, and I'm in this transitional phase. And once things kind of settle, and I develop sort of a routine for each, um, I will, be able to spend more time to prepare for the show, especially when we kind of pick topics to kind of discuss.
Mhm.
I want to at least go into a conversation, at least somewhat informed.
Yeah, and I think right now it's not the biggest deal to be, because again, it's sort of like we're in the creative process right now,
Yeah,
and that's not something that really
yeah,
needs a lot of preparedness. It is mostly just off the cuff
yeah.
ideas going on.
And we're building the show, right?
Right,
Like as far as like the production,
right.
music, like once like I'm able to catch up with these episodes, like we're gonna have to create like an intro, you know what I mean? So like cool stuff like that, an outro, and figure out, music to go along with it, things like that. We actually build the show, and
Mm,
once the show's built out, I think we'll be ready for deeper conversations, topics, concepts, whatever.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's just the natural progression of things. And that, because life is always gonna be there to sort of get in the way. It's just what happens. And we do, like, there's a lot of other creative projects that I've been thinking of lately. Like, I'm in the middle of making an album, I'm doing other stuff. I have my family, a wife and kid.
Yep.
So there's always just shit that's going to be in the way. But I think preparedness, it's for both of us. Because
Yeah.
that's something I definitely need to work on too. Not even just for this podcast, just in life. I need to
Yeah.
show up a little bit more prepared.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think, for right now, that's definitely a good goal to set for moving forward, because when we do start to do things with actual topics, like you said, like if we could sort of come unprepared, then we
Then
just
what are
look
we
like
talk? Then
idiots.
what are we
Yeah,
talking about? We're not
right.
talking about anything. We're just, like, and I don't want to do that.
Right.
You know.
Um, all I can fucking think about.
Now we're fucking syncing up, and we're saying at the same time. I
Yeah,
mean,
this is bad.
fuck me, dude. Yeah.
um,
Jesus.
I think, and for me, something I need to work on. Um, motherfucker, I feel like this might be a very heavily edited episode.
We'll be all right.
Um, is I feel like I state the obvious a lot, or like I need to stop reiterating your point back to you.
Okay. Okay.
Because I feel like I do that a lot. I feel like I do that a lot
Another form of
in
repetition.
general. Yeah, and it's just like, yeah, you said that, so there's no reason for me to be reiterated. Like, I think if I was thinking about this while I was listening to the episodes. One reason why I think I might do that is just because that sort of better helps me understand what you just said if I sort of say it
Yeah.
back to you. And if I agree with you, I don't just want to like dead stop and just say, yeah, I agree. Because I feel like that just sort of like can dead a conversation
Yeah.
in a point. It's sort of like, but if I have nothing to add, it's sort of like, well, just say you agree and move on. Don't just say the thing again.
Okay.
Because the audience got it the first time.
Okay.
So it's just something I need to
Sounds
work
like
on.
a
Is
simple.
just hmm?
Sounds like a simple solution to me.
Yeah, but I think it's gonna be a little bit more work. Just to be again, it all falls under mindfulness. It's like,
Mhm.
we just need to be very mindful of all these things. But these are the things I need to be mindful of: is reiterating your points, my filler words, and trying to be a little less goofy.
Well, why is that? If that's who you are, why do you want to be less goofy?
um, because I personally find it to be annoying. Um, just but I just sort of find myself to be generally annoying, and that is very self-deprecating. But that's
Yeah.
not me saying that I don't like myself, because I do, for the most part, like who I am. I just find myself to be fairly annoying sometimes.
Okay. Well,
Um,
I'll say this. I feel like we would do this podcast and our audience a disservice if we didn't come at these episodes with the full expression of ourselves. And
Hmm.
we are not able to do that without being ourselves authentically,
Sure.
So if you're a goofy motherfucker, be a goofy motherfucker.
But I don't know if I'm I think that's the thing that I need to look at is, am I that goofy when I'm not on a mic trying to talk to an audience? You know what I mean? Like, am I the
Mm.
same person? Am I more serious in my daily life, or am I trying to be funny for an audience? Like, is the goofiness and affectation that I'm putting on to try to be funny in front of an audience of people?
I mean, at the end of the day, I know, I want to be authentic. I want to
Yeah. And so do I.
100% be me
Absolutely.
on the
Yeah.
in front of the mic. But like, you're gonna have to develop some kind of persona, right? Like,
Sure.
there has to be a separation, of on air Dave versus off air Dave, right?
Right.
You
So
know what I
do I
mean? Like,
want the on-air Dave to be that goofy?
yeah. What does your gut tell you?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Right now, I mean, that could change. I mean, I could just, that could be something I say that I'm going to work on, and then it just sort of goes away. Um,
Okay.
but that's just something I am sort of mindful of right now, that, to be sort of less, just because I'm laughing a lot. I noticed that, like, I laugh. I do that a lot. So maybe just sort of
Are
tone
you
that
nervous?
down.
Are you
I don't
nervous? Are
know.
you
That's
anxious?
something. Well, it's definitely anxious. Like, I'm just a generally an anxious person.
Okay.
Um, so I don't know what it is overall. Could just be that I really want you to like me, man.
You're okay, dude. You're
um,
fine.
but yeah, that's not something I am very anxious about, because
Yeah.
because we've been friends for a while now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
Obviously, that goes without saying.
but it's just something I'm mindful of, just like how goofy I am. And maybe let's not turn all of these into a let's correct Dave's internal phobia. So it's but that's just what I'm talking about right now. And I have a microphone, so you need to fucking listen to what I say.
Well, there you go. That's kind of the power of having a mic, right?
Right. But yeah, so that's some shit that I'm looking at as we move forward. Like, when I re-listen to the episodes, do I find myself more palatable as it goes along? And when I did find myself, at first I was like, fuck you, Dave. Like, stop talking.
Sure,
And then
sure.
I got to like later episodes, and I was like, okay, this is a good conversation.
Yeah,
And I think that's the thing, is I just, just being more mindful of where I am in the conversation, my presence in terms of our conversations.
yeah. Oh, I mean, those are all great things to think about and to work on. So I know we've discussed a lot about what we need to work on personally in terms of performance, right? Production wise, I know we don't have a lot of work with. Really, we've only produced one episode technically because of like
Sure.
computer issues. Um, but in terms of production, I know I'd like to, for the both of us, figure out lighting. Um,
Yes,
uh,
very much. Yeah.
you know what's wild? Remember, and I think I've actually mentioned it in like the second episode or so, something. But like I mentioned something about the lights. I only had two lights. I'd lost one light.
Hmm.
Well, funny enough, I found the third light.
Okay.
So I might be able to actually lend you a light and
Perfect.
kind of fix that situation. So that'd be great.
Yeah, yeah, and because lighting is definitely something that's, for me, is not. It's just all the natural light in here, and the light I
Yeah.
have above here doesn't. It just makes things
But
more shiny than anything.
it's not super important right now.
Right.
I think the overall look and the layout of the show and like figuring out the transitions, and
Hmm.
I think that's kind of the most important thing. And then we can kind of figure, focus in on like the actual video feed.
Right. And the video I mean, the one video you said something that I agreed with. Like, there were two different animations going on. There was the
Yeah,
border
that's not
animation,
an
and
yeah,
then,
yeah, yeah. It's not, yeah,
but
no.
um, but
It's a totally different look.
right. How do you think the sound is so far?
That's not something I really kind of pay a lot of focus
Mm-hmm.
well, because you know because if something, I mean, like if there was any issues, it would have been glaring, and I would have addressed it
Right.
at this point. And as of right now, I don't think there are any issues. But
Yeah, I didn't find a
that's
lot. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, like, I'm sure along the way I'll find a way to make the sounds more crisp. I
Mm.
know for the second episode, what I did differently for the vocals um, was I actually panned um, our vocals to our respective sides. So like like on the screen, I'm on the left side and you're on the right side. So I would pan my vocals to the left and your vocals to the right. So if you're looking at the screen, like you're not only looking at us from different sides of it, you could hear us from the, from the, you can hear us individually on the corresponding side. It's kind of a cool little
Yeah.
thing that you wouldn't notice.
Right. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think just a thing for sound is like I needed just a better microphone. Like my microphone is good, but it's just
Yeah.
it's a cheap USB, like it's plugged right into
Yeah.
my laptop.
Yeah.
Like I want to get to the
Do you have an interface?
I don't. But you also have my better microphone that I would need an interface for.
Yeah,
but I want to I definitely want to get one of those Shure. I think it's SM, but it's the mic that all the podcasters use.
What does that go for in the market? Do you know?
It's $400
per mic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like actually, let me look it up real quick just to be 100% sure.
No pun intended.
Yeah. Shut up. Yeah. So there's for the Shure SM7B, which is I think the standard, it's $399.
You know what we should do is once we like get a little bit of an audience, instead of getting money for a sponsorship, we should get somebody to buy us microphones for a sponsorship.
There you go.
There you go, kid.
There you go. That's a great idea.
Fucking smart, kid. I'm fucking smart.
Fucking. Because I also think like because I also want to be able to grab the microphone, and move it around.
Dude,
that was an awful. Don't
ever do
thing.
that
again. Fuck. Don't edit that out. I want that to stay in the video.
That should be on a report card. Were there any instances where he did that?
Did I make any blowjob maneuvers? But you know what I mean? Like I can't touch this microphone. Or else it just goes crazy. But you see, like in Joe Rogan, like he's always like pushing it towards his face, pushing it away from his face. Like if he adjusts, he adjusts with it, and all that kind of stuff. And any podcast, like Tiger Belly, they do that shit all the time.
Actually got me an arm. I don't know if you can see it, but I got me a new arm. $15 on fucking Amazon.
There you go.
It's definitely, I mean, you get what you pay for. It's, kind of flimsy and not that very strong, but it'll do for now.
Hey, and again, as long as like I have this, like this microphone is working very well for now. Mm-hmm. I think my breathing kind of comes in, but I sort of placed it in a different spot. So I don't think it's picking up as much of like every time I breathe in and breathe out or take a sip of something.
Gotcha.
Even though I'm sure there's a filter I could put on that could help with that, but I don't know. And that's the thing is I don't know much about podcast vocal editing, but
there's actually a really great plugin that I use from Waves. It's called the GW Voice Centric. And they have a preset for specifically podcasts, and just all you gotta do is turn it on, and you sound great.
Right on. I'll have to get that.
So yeah, look into it.
Yeah. So, is there anything else? Anything else you got to say, or do you think we should talk about?
Nah, man. Yeah, that's all I have to say for today.
Yeah, I'd say this is by far, I think, our longest episode yet, which is good.
There you go. New milestone.
Yep. So okay. So thank you everybody for joining us again on this journey as we discover what is this podcast. I have been Dave.
And I'm your boy Gene. Check you out later.
And we'll see you in the next one.